This new episode is on Amadako's The Housemaid. Set in Kataso in Accra, the story is about a young woman named Efia who is hired as a housemaid by Tika, but Tika unfortunately finds out about a plot Efia's family have tried to set against her. When the truth finally comes out, Efia escapes her boss's house, ends up in the streets where she gives birth to a little girl with the Down syndrome. For this discussion, my guest is Jessica Horn, a women's rights advisor, writer, and feminist activist. Though the topics are serious, we decided to be all in colors at Nubuke Foundation since we believe in a more inclusive and respectful future society.
So I think what's really interesting is, again, it begins with sort of very moralistic tone and sort of people discussing in the market about other people's sexual lives and sexual business. But when it comes to the lives of the women involved, I find it fascinating because there's, in a way, quite a lot of ownership of women's own desire. So for example, when Tika decides she's going to leave home because she's upset because she feels like her mother killed her father, or led to his demise, I should say. There's an interesting paragraph where her mother is sort of reflecting on, she wasn't quite sure what to do with her distress, and she thought maybe I should just go out and have wild sex with some of my lovers, And I found that interesting because I was like, certainly in most representations of African women in literature, you wouldn't get that kind of sensibility, particularly from a woman, a sort of established, middle-class trader, got good money and all of that, and to have this kind of wild sexual life and a sense of like using sex as a form of like pain relief or stress relief. So I found that very interesting. Tika, her daughter, who also gets pregnant and then ultimately decides to have an abortion. And, her mother then sort of piles on all of this, like, how dare you, kill your womb stuff. While her mother, of course, is sleeping around with half of the town, But Tika goes on and does it anyway, and she just, with total disregard, and she's like, whatever, it's my body, it's my right. So I find this really interesting kind of use of one's own body. But I think for me, almost the most shocking thing, but that comes across as kind of normal, but is shocking, is the treatment of the young girl, Efia. So the idea that her mother and grandmother team up to try and find a way to get money out of a relative. And they do it by deploying this young woman to go and work in the house of Tika. And, by being a servant, also finding a way to get herself pregnant and, follow through in this whole plot of trying to find a way to get Tika's money. I find that really cruel. I feel that the young girl is, she's being pushed around by these women. She's being put in grave danger because, as we know, unprotected sex can lead to lots of things. Pregnancy is one. She could have ended up with an STI. Yeah. She could have been with a guy who, was really dangerous and ended up trying to kill her. You don't know. So you're pushing this young girl who really doesn't know much about sex and doesn't know much about these interactions into a really dangerous position. And I found it amazing that a mother would do that to her daughter, and that a grandmother would also conspire. And so for me, that was almost like the height of the transactional idea about the body, that it wasn't even their bodies they were transacting, it was somebody else's body.
Tika uses sex as a transaction, and then she actually makes a lot of money out of it, right? So she becomes a businesswoman running her thing, and she's using it like every time she kind of talks about it, she's like, okay, let's keep it on the down low, because she knows that a sort of reputation would come if, community starts to know about it. But still, she still acts as if it's something that is empowering to her. And I wanted to know your opinion about sex be used as an empowering tool in this kind of setting.
Empowering is difficult. I guess it's a subversive tool, because the thing is, basically, the women are having sex in a context which is not particularly friendly to them, right? Women are having sex in the context of patriarchy. And so in the end, it will always be the woman blamed if anything goes wrong. So it's not as if it's an even playing field when it comes to the sex. Okay, so the women are inevitably going to be blamed, and the women also still ultimately live in fear of what people will say about them. They know everyone's talking behind their backs already. They're worried to greater or lesser degree about whether someone's going to talk in front of their face. But ultimately, the women always know that someone will speak about them. So it's sex in the context of patriarchy. In that context, sure, she's using it subversively. It's almost like she just decided that's how it goes, so let me use it to my advantage, which I think is subversive. So I don't know if she was existing in a context where she had full choice and the kind of gender power dynamics were different if that would have been her active choice.
Yeah.
Maybe she would have just had a lover, somebody she actually was attracted to and somebody she really liked. And that's where she would have her sexual pleasure from. It wouldn't be sleeping with all of these people because it made business sense. Do you see?
Yeah. And there's also a very strong critique of the women blaming, and especially witchcraft. And that's the way it starts, like the book starts with that. So there's this character, she's an elderly woman, she is a widow, she doesn't have children, and so because she's this isolated woman, that's where the witchcraft blaming starts. Because I had never really thought about it that way, as the witchcraft blaming as a way of keeping the system, the rules, the society in place.
So the whole discourse around witchcraft is, of course, an easy way to kind of isolate things that society doesn't want women to do and to turn those women into social pariahs. A friend was recently talking about some work they were doing in the north of Ghana in the witch camps. And the research that they found was that basically most of the women, from their research, most of the women that ended up in these witches' camps were actually women who were doing really well economically.
Okay.
Yeah, independently. And then it was like a bitterness around it. And so people wanted to kind of take away that power that they were gaining by their kind of economic success. And so finding ways to kind of label them as witches and then socially isolating them meant that their economic power then suddenly just diminished.
And
so
it was seen as a threat to the power.
So it's a way to limit women's transgression or women gaining too much power. Yeah, the use of witchcraft is just the use of any other kind of quite powerful way to silence. I think it's the same now. In the discourse now, what we have is anybody who's transgressing gender and social norms is un-African, un-Christian, and immoral.
True.
Right? That's
Westernized.
Kind of westernized. Un-African, un-Christian, immoral. And so it's like a witchcraft accusation. It's like saying that this person has brought some sort of negative thing upon us and that we have to isolate them and remove them from society. Otherwise, what they're doing is going to impact other people. And so, you know, it's a tool of social control.
But I have the feeling that because of the way religion is practiced, the way it's practiced, right? People tend to forget about their own agency and responsibility in their doings and always putting it in, you know, in the hands of God or the hands of the president. You know, it's always somebody else. But it's, you know, my question to you is actually a very open question, but it's just like to think, and also in terms of possibilities. You know, there is critique and it's needed, but what are the possibilities? And what do you think could be the possibilities of taking responsibility in this kind of setting, you know, in a patriarchal society? Okay, we get it. Who is to blame? It's always the women. Everything is on the women. How could people make a difference? How could men make a difference? Those in power, how could they be allies, you know, and change and help change the structure?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a visitor in Ghana, so it's just my observation of being here that I noticed that the society is obviously a mix of different communities, but in general, there's a tremendous concern for social cohesion. And I think that's what accounts for Ghana being peaceful, right? There's a tremendous concern for social cohesion, which means that there's a lot of rituals constantly performed to make sure that everybody's together. Community functions are paramount. So everybody's always attending so-and-so's burial, so-and-so's naming ceremony, all of this and that, which is a way of creating community cohesion. Everybody's staying together all the time. Even church attendance, constant ritual practice is a way of keeping everybody together. But what I also find is that there's this like sort of really visceral fear of ever being pointed out as being somehow not part of the pack, right? So it's like this pressure to conform is so strong that there's this fear always of like appearing a bit different or being a bit different. And so there's a lot of mechanisms in place to make sure that everybody conforms all the time. So in the context of that, I understand the religiosity and the degree of religiosity, because the way that the religion has been taken on is in a very conformist way. You know, religion can do anything. Religion can actually do anything. Religion has been the inspiration for revolutionary movements. You'll find, you know, people in religious practice who've inspired people to rise up against dictatorial power and protected people, you know, in dictatorships. And you equally find religion that's used for fundamentalist aims, and to kind of force everybody to see one way and, you know, use violence and what have you. So religion has this huge spectrum of uses. So I feel like any society in a historical moment chooses, you know, how it wants to be engaging religion according to what it needs. So I feel like Ghana's in a very conformist moment.
Okay.
Very conformist moment. And it needs some pushing up against. So I think if anybody's going to change it, I mean, what it takes is, like, if there are any women who are coming together here to challenge things, it requires solidarity. Because as soon as you stick your head above the parapet, of course you're going to be fed with all kinds of criticism about what you're doing. Are you shaming your family? You know, I mean, you know, you're bringing the place into disrepute, you know, all of this kind of social mechanisms of social control, discourses of social control to silence the dissent. And so it requires solidarity. I always say in any activism, if you know what you're doing is in the interest of justice and in the interest of rights, then it's right, you know? And of course you're going to irritate some people. Because a system of oppression or a system of power doesn't want to be challenged, and it will always push back at you. And it will always label you, you know, in more and more severe ways until you suddenly become a total outcast. So the power that we have being in solidarity is to say, it may be disgraceful to you, but to us, we actually think that this is honorable. There are a number of really amazing transgressive activists in Ghana doing things. And so attend their events, go and support them. You know, you have the Adventures from the Bedrooms of African Women, Nana Dako's blog. Again, support that space. Let's Talk Consent and Drama Queens and the work that they're doing, Nana Akosua Hansen and that community of people who are doing work around rape culture and around questioning the discourses of consent and what we consider to be women's right to say yes or no, you know, support it. You know? So, you know, I feel like guys too can weigh in a bit more, and some do, but I think more need to. If there are public events and it's open to everybody, attend them. You know, learn, listen to what women are saying, and have some humility. Think, you know, check yourself, critique yourself, think about the ways that you interact that maybe are affirming or not affirming. Talk to your brothers, talk to other guys, you know, open the conversations, do the work. You know, I feel like it's not that difficult. And there are definitely men in Ghana who do that, and I think it's very important when they do.
Well,
because of course, men who challenge patriarchy are also then, you know, in the running for witchcraft accusations, right? It's like, because the patriarchal system works with anybody it can use. So it works with women, it works through men as well. And so men who challenge patriarchy will also face, you know, critique and face being admonished and face being told that they're not being real men, or, you know. And so I think that there also, you know, there's always power at play. And so, yeah, I think it's important to just step in and, like I said, observe, listen, stand up for what's right. It's not that hard.
Word.